Subconsciously, Americans don't always like to admit to being American. When we go abroad and someone asks us where we are from, yes, we usually answer with the United States. But there is always a caveat. We like to tell strangers our heritage, as if it explains who we are in a different context. I've had the fortunate experience of visiting both countries of my dominant heritage, and during each trip, one to Germany and one to Italy, I found myself explaining to people that I too was German or Italian, even though this was only my first time ever stepping foot in those countries. I can best explain this practice as a means to form kinship, to show that while we are not in fact from the same place, we have the same history in our blood. After many years of research and studying his family genealogy, Ken Fiddler and his daughter, Mary Beth, were able to make a journey to the town in Germany that their ancestors fled in order to find religious and political freedom in the Americas. I'm Marley, your host, sitting here with the ping jockey himself, Mr. Kenneth H. Fiddler, and I want to thank our listeners for joining us today for our limited series, The Origins of the Ping Jockey. So, Mr. Fiddler, I understand that you traced your ancestry all the way back to the 1700s. Where are your ancestors from?
A little town called Dierbach. Used to be Bavaria, but now it's Germany.
Interesting. And was the area known for anything in particular, or did your family have a certain type of trade while they lived there?
As far as I know, I think a lot of them were tailors. But when they moved to the United States, they became having hotels.
So they did end up immigrating to the United States. What was that process like for them? Do you have any records?
I have records.
And what do they say?
They had a long journey once they left, and they came on the ship Osgood and landed in Philadelphia September 29, 1750. This journey lasts from the beginning of May to the end of October, fully half a year. Amid such hardships as no one is able to describe adequately with their misery. The cause is because the Rhine boats from the Rhine boats from Heilbronn to Holland have to pass by 26 custom houses, at all of which the ships are examined, which is done when it suits the convenience of the custom house officials. In the meantime, the ships with the people are detained long, so that the passengers have to spend much money. The trip down the Rhine lasts therefore 4, 5, and even 6 weeks, because things are very dear there. The poor people have to spend nearly all of their having during that time. The second stage of the journey was from Rotterdam to one of the English ports. Most of the ships called at Cowes on the island of Wight. This was a favorite stopping place, as 142 ships are recorded as having sailed from Rotterdam to Cowes.
So how long in total did it take?
Almost 6 months.
6 months.
From May to October.
That's quite the journey.
And I think I read where it's 400 and some people on a ship.
Yes.
And they weren't that big.
No. Well, he mentions people with little money. I wonder if they were comfortable and that they didn't spend their money too quickly.
Well, they try not to, but going through that, they had to spend most of their money before they even got to the United States.
And that can lead to problems.
Yeah, and I think going across the Atlantic at that time, a lot of people ended up dying. When you have 400, almost 500 people on there.
On a ship in 6-month
And
journey.
half of them get sick. Yeah, it's not easy.
So we know because you're here that they did make it safely and they settled. But I'm curious to find out more about their life in Dierbach, and I think you were too. And you had the opportunity to go and see where your heritage is from.
Yeah.
Why were you able to make this trip?
Well, a few years ago, my daughter, Mary Beth, told me that she was had to make a business trip to Zurich, Switzerland. And she wanted to take me along a week early so we could visit Germany and maybe go to Dierbach and also where the fiddlers lived. And I said I'd be happy to do that. And we did that. And
so what was it like getting over there? What was it like making the trip there with Mary Beth?
oh, I really enjoyed it. But after we landed in Germany, we went to the town where we thought the fiddlers lived. And we never could find their cemetery, but we did find the church where they used to go. And we visited there. But then we started, my mother's side of the family was a Horner, and they were from Dierbach. And so from there, we drove to Dierbach to see what it looked like. And once we found it, we went to a vineyard where they were supposed to have a bed and breakfast, and we found it. And we met the lady that owned it, and we told them where we were from, and that we wanted to visit there for a couple of days. And so we made reservations to stay there a couple of days, but we still wanted to go back where we started from to look a little bit more for the fiddlers. And then the next day we came back to Dierbach, and we went to where we signed up for our apartment. And the lady that ran the place was very nice, and she, while she was talking to us, she got lunch for us, and we were sitting there talking, and we told them that I had a friend that was also doing genealogy, and that he and his wife had come over and visited Dierbach, and they met a family, and I told them the names of the family, but we understood that fellow had died. And she said, he didn't die, he's still alive. Here, I'll phone him and tell him to come.
Oh, wow.
And she called him, and pretty soon he arrived. He took us, and we walked from there to where his house was. And he introduced us to his wife, and I think his sister-in-law, and the neighbors next door were also relatives, and they were very friendly. And we told them that we were only staying for a day right then, and then we were going to come back again. And so they invited us for that day, that they were going to have a big meal for us. And the next day we arrived there, and they had it was almost like a big Christmas dinner, and we had a good time. And it turned out that he was doing a lot of genealogy. And after that, a lot of times we were exchanging Christmas cards with information. But I just found out recently, this past Christmas, when I sent him a Christmas card, they sent a letter back saying he had passed away.
Well, you're lucky to have met him. I'm curious what other aspects of this trip to Dierbach really stood out and maybe taught you a little bit about your family that you hadn't known before?
Well, I had a name of a Horner that lived there, and we looked them up. And we went to their house, and it turned out there was a couple that he was exactly my age, and during World War II, he was drafted into the German army, and then he became a prisoner. And he told me, he said, being a prisoner, he found out the English took the best of the prisoners. The Americans were next, and the Russians were the worst. But and his wife, Dierbach, is close to the French border, and his wife was a teacher, and every day she'd cross the French border and go into the town near there and be a teacher. And she said, would you like to visit France? And we said, sure.
So you went with her?
And she took us in a car, and we crossed the border without any trouble. And she took us all around there and showed us a lot of great places, and she knew the history of everything. That was really something.
Wow.
Yeah.
What else would you like to mention? So did you go to any other interesting places that had significance to your family?
Not really. We did visit some different places there. There was another town we wanted to see, and if I remember correctly, we went up on a car, up on a wire. I forget where it went from this little town to, I guess, a place where we could view the mountains or something like that. I don't quite remember that anymore, but we had a good time.
Fascinating.
And while we were there, we all of a sudden we found out that our flight to leave there was canceled.
What caused it?
Well, it turned out that a volcano, I think it was in Iceland, blew up. And everything went up in the air, and they canceled all aircraft flying. It wasn't safe for them to fly. And so we were going to be sitting there for about 3 days more. And right away, the hotel wanted to raise the prices. So we complained so much, they decided not to do that. And then they said, Mary Beth had a certain ticket, but since I was just a passenger, I wasn't in just as good a shape, and they wanted to raise my price a lot more. Mm-hmm. But everybody complained, and they finally decided not to do that.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. So that was a little bit different.
So do you have any big takeaways? You know, since you did so much work finding out about your family and you finally went over there, do you have any big takeaways from your trip?
Well, I remember one thing. Before Mary Beth and I decided to go, when we were making plans, I told her we better get medical insurance. And she said, oh, I don't think we even need that. And so she asked somebody else, and they said, you better get it. And so we got it, and it wasn't that expensive. But when the volcano blew up, and they, first of all, when I knew we were only going to be traveling 11 days, and I only take one medical pill a day, so I only took 11 pills. So that meant I needed more.
And the man who always come prepares only brought the minimum.
Well, that's how you learn.
It's true.
And so we went to a pharmacy, and I told them what I needed, and they said they'd order it, and that insurance would pay for it. And after we actually flew home, we found out that they paid a lot more because the hotels were raising a lot of
their rates.
Yeah, and they paid everything. So that ought to teach you something.
Yes, absolutely. Out of curiosity, did you mention how you were getting around in Europe?
We, when we first landed, and we rented a Volvo, and that's where we drove all around to the town where the fiddlers lived, and from there all the way to Dierbach, and we made that trip back and forth a couple of times. And then finally it was time to go to Zurich, and we were going to drive there. And Mary Beth went to GPS, and it said no information. And she really got very unhappy.
Oh.
And then she called the outfit that was renting the car, and they gave us an address to go about 20 miles away, and they said they will take care of you. And we drove there and told them our problem. And all they had to do was put another CD in the trunk. And I had all the information of Switzerland.
Oh, so that was... That issue was corrected pretty quickly, but I'm sure it caused a little bit of panic for the two of you.
Yeah. Another thing, I guess when we were traveling in Switzerland, and we got to a place where there was a big escalator, and we were pulling carts, and we both stood there wondering how we'd get up there. And there was another couple that had just come down, and they stopped, and they said, "Here, we'll help you." And they showed us how to put it on there, and we went all the way up, and no problem.
Interesting.
But it was a little bit
confusing.
If you didn't know what you were doing,
yeah,
you get in trouble.
Yeah, airports always, I think, put people into panic mode, especially when you're not in your own country.
Yeah.
I've been there myself, so you just ask and ask and ask until you get the answer you're looking for. Well, it really sounds like you and your daughter had a fantastic trip going back to the homeland, if you will. And I found it interesting that early on in the episode you mentioned that your family was originally tailors but then became hotel owners once they arrived in the New World. So I hope that next week we can let our listeners know what kind of entrepreneurs they were and where they started their business once they moved to America.
That would be very good.
Well, we look forward to letting the world know where and when they became hotel entrepreneurs. This is Marley and the Ping Jockey signing off.
Bye-bye.